I'm Katie Resendez, and I'm the Director of Children's Ministry here at UUCP. Let's take a minute to comfort ourselves. Stretch your body a little bit. Maybe if you don't know the person you're sitting next to, give them a little hi so you can be more comfortable with them. Look around, we have our amazing orange chairs, but we also have a few rockers and chairs where you can put your feet up, and a beanbag that can be dragged wherever it needs to be beanbagged. That's a verb, right? And we have a rug that's actually really comfy to lay on and sit on. And you are allowed to find comfort in any of those places, because it is important that worship is a comfortable place for you. That you not feel like you have to earn your spot in this room. That you have to be worthy of the special chair. This is all here for you. And we make it our space. And by living into it and letting ourselves be fully comfortable, we make this space real. We make this worship real and sacred. There are lots of noises happening to this morning. There are also hearing assist devices if you're having a hard time hearing. Recognizing that both of those are happening. I'm also seeing lots of people looking uncomfortable in your bodies, and I'm hoping that's because people went for amazing hikes this week and not because they're achy and sore from too much labor. But again, figuring out where you can be in worship. Shall I tell a story? Okay. There once was a kingdom. And now, as Unitarians, we don't often tell stories of kingdoms because kings and queens don't always make the best, most just, most kind decisions. And we don't like to take them as our heroes and our leaders. But this king was a very, very, very good king. In fact, he was so good that the people who lived in his kingdom, who worked very hard in the fields and in their shops and were often very tired, would come to him for help making decisions. Because sometimes when we work all day, be it at school, be it cleaning our room, being in the fields, being it at our jobs, making decisions becomes really tough. How many of you have ever been asked, what do you want for dinner? And the answer is, oh, I have no idea. Because making that decision is too hard. So part of that king's role in his community was to take on some of the decision-making labor. And it went so far that people would come to the king when they were feeling unsure about things they had done. And they would say, King, so I did this, and I could have done this, but I chose to do this. Was that good or bad? And the king would tell them, that was a good choice. That was a good thing that a good person would do. And sometimes people would come and ask him, is this good or bad? And he would say, that choice was bad, but it doesn't make you a bad person. Just let's think about how you can make a better choice, or how can we help you fix that? All sorts of people from the kingdom would come to him to hear what was good and what was bad, to the point where it felt like he was the arbiter of good and bad. Arbiter means someone who gets to make the decision. And it was a lot of work, and it was hard work, and people would line up, and at one point it started to feel like he would be like, good, bad, good, good, bad, and very rote, and he had a set of reasons in his head and how he would make the decisions, but his job sucked. Being the king and doing that all day long stunk. It was miserable, and he carried the weight of so much on him. So he took some time to think about it. He asked his grandren, who was very, very old and very, very wise. He asked his niece, who was very, very young and could barely talk, and was also very, very wise. And he thought, and he thought, and he thought. And he said, I have an announcement to make. And he called all the people of the community together, and he offered them food, because that's how you get people to come together. And he said, I need to tell you all something. I will no longer be telling you what is good or bad. And the people gasped. Now, some of them gasped with fear. Oh no, what are we going to do? How will we know what is good or bad? And some of them gasped with relief and with a sense of, oh, well, we've been really suspicious of him lately. Why were we letting one dude do all this? But everyone felt better with that decision. This one person on this throne wasn't going to decide what was good or bad. But of course, they had lots of questions. How will we know what is good? And the king said, I don't know, but I think maybe good and bad, essentially, down in its core, at the very beginning of time in the world, doesn't exist. And the people all went, what? No, we know that there are some things that are good and some things that are bad. And the king said, I think that maybe things that are good help our community feel better and more connected. And things that are bad push us apart from one another and isolate us. COVID, bad. And the people thought about it. And a little kid said, but that means if we all together make up good and bad, when I'm alone in the forest, then there's no good or bad. And everyone kind of looked and thought, like, yeah, well, what's the point of judging good and bad? And a very, very old Grand Wren said, I think the point of judging good or bad is figuring out if you belong with us or away from us. And that brought up tons and tons and tons of questions. And so as you can imagine, this community embarked on a years and years and decades and centuries long adventure in figuring out what it means to be good or bad without going to ask the king. There's one more part of this that you should know. The king's family was really worried when this happened. And they said, but we've been kings and queens in our community for generations. How are you stepping down? How are you giving up that spot? And the king said, well, I'm just as good at this as anyone else. It's just that you've trained me to do it and I have the time to do it. If I had to work out in the field tilling corn, I couldn't sit and have these thoughts all day. And maybe we should share some of that work. Oh gosh. Which you can imagine for royalty was a hard thought. But as they thought about it, he talked his family through this idea that, yeah, it had been generations and generations, but the king's great-great-grandfather was adopted, so it's not like it was about blood relations. And they had lived in 4 different castles, so it wasn't about where they lived. And what the king realized was he wasn't special. The previous king before hadn't ordained him with all the magical power of good and bad in the world to make him king. It was just that he had been put in the role. And if there was nothing special about him, it meant there was nothing special about anyone else either. There were things that were unique and different, but no one was more deserving or less deserving. No one had special access to the knowledge of what was good or bad. And no one had more of a right to sit in the throne or the beanbag chair. And with that, the kingdom knew they would struggle and push against one another and have to do a lot of thinking and figure out how to make it work. And they decided it was worth it because it was what was good. You are all so, so powerful and very, very loved.